studied a lot, did you?
I did online. I went, I did,
I do too.
I've done that.
I was out of town this weekend, so in the hotel, that's what I was.
Yeah, there you go.
Ah,
Two more highlighted. Maybe it's not that. Because I remember that I looked
All right, I'd like to call this Dalton-Whitfield County Planning Commission meeting to order for November 28th. Turn it over to Chairman Liberty.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tonight's meeting, first order of business is to declare we do have a quorum. We have two members out, Eric and Octavio. Second order of business to approve or correct the minutes to the previous meeting. Any additions, deletions, motions?
Second.
David makes motion, Chris seconds. All in favor, say aye. All opposed, the ayes have it. Into the general meeting, or at least the open public portion of the meeting, we have 5 county and 4 city requests to review. Before we get to them, Mr. Ethan Calhoun of the Northwest Georgia Regional Office will review the procedures for this meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, the meeting tonight will follow our set agenda. You can see that on the screen. Out front, as you walked in to the left of the door, you noticed that there were several papers out there. One of those is an agenda. If you'd like to have one, we should have plenty of copies. And the chairman will lead the meeting and work us through each item on the agenda. And the same procedure for every item on the agenda tonight will be the same. And that is, as the chairman opens the item on the agenda, I will come forward and give a presentation from staff. And once my presentation is over, the chairman will ask for the petitioner to come forward. That's the person who's requesting to rezone their property. Once that petitioner has come forward and addressed any questions that may come up, then the next step will be for the chairman to ask if anyone else other than the petitioner would like to speak in favor of the rezoning. Once all comments in favor of the rezoning have been heard, the chairman will ask if anyone would like to come forward and speak in opposition of the item for the rezoning. It's very important tonight that if anyone would like to speak in opposition, that you go back out front where that table with the papers is, and you take an agenda and determine whether the item that you're here tonight to speak in opposition is within the county or the city. There's 2 forms. We ask that you please fill out the form for the county item or the city item that you want to speak in opposition of. That's a state law requirement, and it's a simple disclosure form. And please, as you sign that, please print your name where we can read that so that I can make sure that we get your name and information correct in the minutes, so that can be made part of the permanent record. And once the opposition has been heard, the chairman will ask if the petitioner would like to come forward and rebut or address any of the issues that came up in the opposition's remarks. And if no new evidence is presented in the petitioner's rebuttal, the chairman will close that public hearing and no further comment will be heard on that item. Chairman will open the next item, and again, the same procedure will follow through the entire agenda. Once all the public hearings have been held, the chairman will move into the regular meeting. And you all are welcome to stay all through the meeting in the second portion of this meeting, which is the regular meeting, where the planning commission will go item deliberate a recommendation. And that recommendation will be sent forth to the Board of Commissioners and to the City of Dalton Mayor and Council. They will use that recommendation and the minutes from this meeting to make their final decision to approve or deny. So again, tonight's meeting is for these public hearings and for recommendations to be made. No final action will occur in tonight's meeting for any rezonings. Those will take place next month in the December meetings of the Board of Commissioners, the City of Dalton Mayor and Council. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ethan. The first request to be heard tonight is that of Charles Smith to rezone from general agriculture to R5, tract of land a little over 10 acres at 1496 Houston Valley Road in Ringgold, or in Dalton. That is a Whitfield County issue. Ethan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We can see the request here. And we can see the zoning map requesting to go from general agriculture to rural residential. When you take a look at the zoning map, you can see the zoning in this area is predominantly general agriculture, which we see as the dark green color on the map. And the property as it stands is adjacent to multiple parcels that are zoned R5. You can see those to the west and the south. We can also see several islands of rural residential R5 zoning. They're that sort of tan or orange color on the zoning map. We can also see the suburban agriculture zone district in this area, but overall, we see this is a pretty typical rural area where we see rural residential zoning, general agriculture, and the same type of land uses. Most of these properties in the area are conforming. When we look at the subject property on the next slide, as well as the surrounding area, from terms of land use, how it's developed currently, you can see that the subject property has two buildings on it, two primary buildings. One is a site-built single-family detached dwelling. The other is a manufactured home. And when we looked at zoning or development in this area from the aerial perspective, you can see it's a low-density area. There are some smaller tracts of land. We do see in the area some manufactured homes. And we do see, again, some smaller lot sizes in some R5 zoning. When we take a look at the next slide, we can see the close-up. You saw that close-up of the property with the two buildings. Next, we can see the future development map in the comprehensive plan, which calls for this area to be within the Rural Agricultural Reserve. And the intent of the Rural Agricultural Reserve is to maintain an overall low density in the unincorporated county, and particularly to keep unit per acre lot density at a minimum at a low density. And when we take a look at this area, you can see that predominantly we have larger tracts. But along the roadways and some private drives and access easements, we do see smaller lots being carved off. This request was spurred by the petitioner's desire to be able to divide off a portion of this property in order to separate the manufactured home from the site-built single-family dwelling. So that would create two tracts of land where we currently only have one. Based on the size of the subject property, this could be achieved as it is already zoned in the sense that you can have two primary dwellings on a single tract of land. So we're dealing with a conforming property as it stands. And the minimum lot size in general agriculture is 5 acres. And with this property being just over 10 acres, it could be divided into two tracts of land as it's currently zoned. When we take a look at what potential impact an R5 rezoning could have on this property, the potential impact is that, of course, you could create smaller tracts of land than 5 acres. And with the potential with some road frontage, there could be more tracts of land created from this property. However, given the fact that it already has two single-family dwellings on this 10 acres and a limited amount of road frontage, ability to create many tracts of land doesn't really exist at this location. And of course, with lack of sewer, high-density type development is not likely. And when we take a look at the effect, the net effect of changing this zoning, as I mentioned, this property could be divided as it stands without the need for rezoning into two parcels. And again, with general agriculture, you can have up to 2 single-family dwellings on that parcel of land, including a manufactured home. So when we look at the net density change, the petitioner's request would simply create 1 additional parcel of land. That parcel would be less than 5 acres and would contain a manufactured home. From the standpoint of changing the character of the area, the petitioner's request certainly would not change the character of the area. It would simply change the lot lines on the tax assessor's map, and it would change the zoning of this property. And again, as I mentioned earlier, and as you can see in the staff analysis and the adjacent properties, R5 is not an uncommon property in this area, and it is adjacent to the subject property on two adjacent sides. In terms of impact that R5 could present also, we do always have the potential that if a piece of property was divided and a new tract was created, that a duplex, as long as they could meet the lot size setbacks and manage on-site septic, can have a duplex in R5. While that's not the petitioner's request, it is certainly a possibility that could take place in the future. Therefore, it may be worth considering, if this is to be approved, that a condition in order to limit this property to single-family only, which would limit to only a manufactured home or a site-built single-family detached dwelling, which would make sure that this would be in line with all the adjacent properties as they're currently developed. The other condition to consider for potential approval of this property is to request that the petitioner come forward with a meets and bounds description of this property to show us exactly how much land they wish to subdivide for the manufactured home, where that piece of property could be, that tract of land could be subdivided and could be zoned itself R5 without having to zone the entire 10 acres as R5 to mitigate and limit the amount of potential future density. That's something for consideration, but overall, the staff recommendation is that this rezoning can be approved based on the fact that the R5 zone district is prevalent in this area and that the net effect of this rezoning will likely not incur a change in the character of this area. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Is there a typo in the documents that?
I believe there is.
Yes, sir. Any questions? Commissioners? Thank you, Ethan.
Thank you.
Mr. Smith? Microphone, state your name and address for the record, please.
Charles Smith, 110 Kaufman Springs Road, Lafayette, Georgia, 30728.
You have anything you'd like to add? Do you have anything you'd like to add?
You did a pretty good job of it. Basically, what I was trying to do is I like to miss out on the sale of a home because I wanted to sell the whole shooting match, and the person that was going to buy the house was going for a VA loan, and the VA wouldn't loan with 2 houses on it. And so what we wanted to do was we were going to take 2 acres for the mobile home, because that's one that we got there that we just make available to old sick Vietnam veteran. I would say he's a renter, but renters pay rent and he don't. And that's what we want to do. We want to protect him, and we wanted the people that bought the home to be able to get as much of the property as they could get. But we had to split it up in to 5-point-something acres so they could get their VA loan. And at some point, the people that bought the house will be buying all of the property. So this is really kind of a moot point. I was told that I might not ought to even come over here with things the way they are, but I figured I'd put in the paperwork so I'd come see how it works.
So are you planning on moving the mobile home to a different portion of the property?
Not until the guy that's staying in it dies, which could be not too long. And then it'll be destroyed.
Okay, we're just looking at the tracks now. So you see, without that shared driveway.
Chuck, are you okay with the restriction on the, no duplexes? Or would your buyer have a problem with that?
I don't think so. I think he wants to hunt on it.
Of course.
I personally would have something against it. That's why I wanted 10 acres to start with, so it wouldn't be anybody close by.
Well, no, you don't have a problem with the restriction.
No, I'm
You're just trying to
highly in favor of that.
Okay, we have no further questions. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Is there anybody else who'd like to speak in favor of this request? Is there anybody who'd like to speak in opposition?
Good evening, everybody. I'm glad this is up on the map because it's divided up and it can be GA and divided just as it is without changing the density level. And here's why. Every time a rezoning request is made and approved to a higher density than it was originally, it allows the next rezoning request in the area to use that property to raise that density even higher. Mr. Calhoun even pointed that out, that there are spots in there that are R-zoned, and you're putting another R5 zoning in there, which makes it likely the next one will be approved. In fact, Mr. Calhoun even discussed this very same fact in his staff analysis for Patterson Farms. I quote, "The pattern of development in this area of Whitfield County has not experienced a development of this size or density in the past. And if the proposed development is approved and completed as planned, there is the potential that it could act as a catalyst for more development in this area." And what I'm saying is this is exactly how this spreads. It's like a house of cards. One R5 is built on the next R5, and it makes it easier and easier to get the rezonings that happen. Mr. Calhoun recognized that rezoning the area as a high-density PUD development would have long-term effects on rezoning to higher and higher densities. That's what we're seeing here. And as you're aware of, we're seeing that in the north side. Rezoning a property should be rare and few. It should not be done just that way, so especially in this case, because it can be done without rezoning. There's no reason to approve this because the gentleman can do exactly what he wants the way it is. In this rezoning request, the staff analysis notes that the staff cannot recommend approval of this rezoning. Yet the writer goes on to give reasons for approval. I'm a bit confused. If he cannot recommend approval, why is he giving reasons for approval?
That was covered as a typo.
I didn't hear that.
That was a typo. It
So
should
he
have been
did
"and,"
recommend.
Yes.
I do not understand. All right. I keep hearing this, a man should be allowed to do what they want with their land. Well, if that were true, none of us would be sitting here today. The truth is that zoning districts and codes do tell a person what they can do with their property. If most zoning requests are granted, which they are, why even waste the county's time and money sitting here? If you want to allow people to do whatever they want with their zoning anytime they want, why do we even have zoning? Thank you.
Thank you. Ma'am? State your name and address,
Oh,
please.
Sharon Gibson, 1309 Wimpy Road, Ringgold, Georgia. I'm here because my family has owned property that is really close to this property for 56 years. And we are here for a rural lifestyle. Our concern is rezoning happens. As this lady just said, then it continues, it continues, it continues. So for us, on the opposite side of this ridge, we have concerns of erosion. We have a spring on our property that we utilize. It feeds our pond. Our pond is stocked. That pond is water source for our livestock, for our horses. And erosion is a very serious concern to us. And as development could happen on that ridge, whether it's subdivisions, Airbnbs, our concern is trespassers on our property who want to go hiking, who want to come to my property and pet my horses and maybe get kicked and I get a lawsuit. And then the other is infrastructure. Houston Valley Road has become a dangerous road. I lived there when it was a dirt road. People fly on that road. There's a curve that is very deadly there, and as you come out of Wimpy Road on the hill there, you pray that you don't get T-boned. I pull a horse trailer. It's very dangerous for me to pull out onto that highway. And if this were to become a development someday in the future, just more and more traffic is going to be on that road. And the thing with the infrastructure, it's not there. So where will that money get passed on to the residents that are already there in the form of property taxes? The other concern I have is Buckner Road, which is in Catoosa County, also adjoins that ridge. At some point, a very aggressive developer could join Houston Valley to Buckner Road. Then we would have a road on top of that ridge. So those are my concerns. I'm here to live a lifestyle that's rural, that's calm, that's peaceful, and I want to keep that for me and the generations ahead of me and my family. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Is there anybody who wants to speak else?
Said something about the least intelligent will speak third or something, so I thought I'd jump up here real quick. My name's Mac Davis, and my address is 1300 Wimpy Road. That was my sister that just spoke. She stated we have a family farm over there. And I know there's a lot of people who may be shy that are not going to, and this may be out of protocol if it did shut me down, but could I maybe see the number of people here that are in opposition to this? Show of hands, stand. Okay, all right. So anyway, just so that you know, it is a concern of many people in this area. And no disrespect to the petitioner, I'm sure that what you're asking for is probably what's going to take place, but our concern is not what you're asking for. Our concern is what's going to happen with the next buyer, okay? Because we open up this Pandora's box, and it's just going to grow. As people have stated, there's a rural lifestyle that we're accustomed to. Many of the people that you said, that you saw the show of hands, they are either an established family there, or they moved back to the area like me and my sister did, or we have a few people here, actually several people here, who are recently moved to the area, made massive investments in that area to live that type of lifestyle. And now they feel that that's going to be impeded on them, as do we. We're concerned about the water tables, as stated previously, concerned about the possible trespassing, the wildlife. Mostly we're concerned about a way of life that probably won't change over 5 years, but something that we would like to leave on to our family members that won't change in the next 50. Thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you, sir.
Good evening, guys. Matt Coker, 4485 Cut of Arnell Road. So these guys pretty much said it. I'm just gonna, there's a part of the analysis that catches my attention. I'm gonna read it to you. The subject property already has the right to add a manufactured home to the existing estate due to the fact that the GA zone district allows for up to 2 dwellings per tract of land. All this being said, the subject property would not have to be rezoned to add the proposed manufactured home. Okay. So if we don't have to rezone it to add the proposed manufactured home, then why are we trying to rezone this to R5? It's what I can't understand here. Somebody's got an answer to that. I'm all ears.
We're not trying to rezone it. That gentleman is.
Well,
We're just reviewing his request.
so is there any other reason that we would try to go to R5?
He's trying to get the lot smaller than 5 acres.
So we can't, so we could do this in GA, but we couldn't do it with, say,
Less than 5 acres.
so it would have to be.
of 5 acres.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know, thank you.
What if you went 3 acres and got suburban agriculture?
All right, we'll take one more.
Oh, I better be good.
It's you.
Hello, my name is Natalie Grace, and I live at the end of Wimpy Road. I'm one of the people that invested in my home to make it livable for 5 people. And behind us, we have a little bit of development already. There's off of Buckner Road, there's 2 Airbnbs and a rental, and they are plowing a road, and it's affected our water. Our well water just recently tested for coliform, which is a bacteria that can be resulted from runoff. So I would like to oppose this for my livestock, for my lifestyle. I moved out here to be rural and to have less development and less roads, and I would like to stay that way, please. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, ma'am. All right, to rebuttal?
Can I remove my request, because I agree with everything that I heard?
Yes, sir, you can.
That's why I moved out there, the rural area, and I had,
Okay.
So we,
So we'll deny it when
Well-
it gets to that point?
yeah, we'll have to deliberate on it, but we will deny it as per your request.
okay, thank you.
Yep. That be the case, that closes the public portion on that request. Moving on to item B. Case is Hugh Wilkins seeking to rezone parcel 13-170-01-034 out of 15-acre tract on Old Dixie Highway from suburban agriculture to general agriculture. Ethan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We see here this request to go from suburban agriculture to general agriculture, and we see on the zoning map that the subject property in the center of the map currently is one of few properties in this area zoned suburban agriculture. Subject property is surrounded on approximately 90% of its boundaries in all directions, essentially, by the GA zone district, except for the R5 zone district to the west. And again, you can see R5 in this area as well is not uncommon, but we see largely a GA zone district. This request was submitted in order to bring this piece of property into the same state as a similarly owned adjacent property the petitioner owns as well, in order to develop, expand an existing farm there. And when we take a look next at the aerial photograph and the development in the area, you can see very low density in this area, a lot of forestry, a lot of larger tracts, and even those tracts zoned R5 are those long, narrow tracts that are fairly low density and very rural in nature. We take a look next at the close-up of the property. You can see there got an easement, and then across to the east as a landmark, you can see the South Dixie landfill. And if we go next to the future development map, we see this area is in what we call the rural neighborhood revitalization. This is an area recommending for reinvestment and investment for future development in areas that have seen little development or investment in some time. In terms of the character of this area, certainly rural and agricultural in much of it. There are rural residential areas. But when we take a look at this request, we take a look at the existing and adjacent zoning, Majority of property that's adjacent to the subject property is already zoned GA. We look at the net effect this could have in terms of character. Very little effect in terms of character because most development is quite limited in GA in terms of residential. It does offer the petitioner the opportunity to expand their farm and to have animal husbandry, which could include poultry production houses. And the potential effect of a poultry production house at this location, most of the concerns in regard to that are oftentimes related to smell and sight. Given the fact that proximity to the landfill, smell is not likely a factor that's going to impact this area as much. So in looking at how this could impact adjacent properties, we look at the net effect of a poultry operation or a farm operation, and we see that that is something that can be done on a majority of adjacent property. So this character is not expected to change. This would simply be expanding an existing farm. And based on that, the staff recommendation is that this can be approved. And just add that any type of development, such as poultry operation, would of course be subject to all state approval and water quality and control and things, and waste management and those things to that nature as well. Just wanted to make a mention of that. Staff recommendation is to approve, and we cite no additional conditions are necessary, again, given the existing zoning and development. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Doesn't look like any. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Wilkins?
Hugh Wilkins, 119 Southmont Drive, Calhoun, Georgia. On this property right here, we have 213 acres, excuse me, and 15 acres right in the center is not zoned agricultural, and we'd like to make it agricultural.
Okay. So on that, you own just to the south of the proposed change and just to the north of it also?
Yes, sir. I personally don't own it. I represent people that owns it.
Okay. Okay with that? Okay. Questions? Have nothing else to add? Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else like to speak in favor of this request? Anybody like to speak in opposition? Ladies first.
Okay, I have, first of all, my name is Kathleen Stewart. I'm at 178 George Brock Road, Resaca. And I have some concerns that if, I'm right up there on George Brock Road, and I know that I'm close to the landfill, but the landfill itself, where you actually dump the trash, is a good distance, long drive, so you never smell it. But I'm concerned that if they put chicken houses there, if it's going to affect my property value, which also is going to cause my taxes to drop, which would affect the county. But also, there's a lot of houses right around that area. Now, not right where that site is. And if that's all they develop, that's a good ways for me, so I wouldn't be as concerned about it. But I know that when they put chicken houses in an area, it not only can sometimes affect the property values, it can affect the air values. Plus, when they're taking those chickens out of the chicken houses, trucks are coming up and down the roads often in the middle of the night. And there is quite a bit of residential area right there where George Brock Road is. And if they approve that site, would they end up eventually approving all the rest up to George Brock Road to possibly put chicken houses? That would be a great concern for me. Plus, chicken houses also attract coyotes. And so those are my concerns I'd like y'all to keep in mind.
Okay, thank you.
Richard Holland, 324 Shipman Hill Road. I see they bought this property, the 200 acres, in September from Bowaters, and they're stripping all the land right now. The trees are all being cut off on our side from Shipman Hill Road down to what we call Huey Hill, where the curve is, and on the other side of the land. So, and we see they do have 8 permits for chicken, poultry houses they've got in September. So we just trying to figure out exactly how close they're gonna put these poultries to our property, because Shipman Hill Road is here, and TDD Farms out of Marietta bought all the other land on the other side of Shipman Hill and on the other side of O'Dixie, and they have got tree cutters, and I mean, they just obliterating the land. All the trees are going out the fast as they can right now. They got log trucks up and down Old Dixie right now, and I mean, I guess our biggest concern is, I understand I'm all for progress, make the county better and money and all, but we just need to know how close they're actually gonna put these, chicken houses that they're gonna build, because I do see, like I say, in September, they did obtain 8 permits for, the chicken houses, and I understand this one lot here would not, it was right in the middle of what they have bought. But like I say, Bowaters had this land. Shipman Hill Road was named after my grandfather. His brothers developed this land over 60 years ago. Shipman Hill Road was named after John Shipman, my grandfather, and Herman Shipman, his brother, Jim Shipman, his brother. So we're all like a family on Shipman Hill Road. And we've lived there, and we've dealt with Bowaters as far as, you know, they come in, cut their pulpwood, come back, plant more trees, the forest comes back, everything kind of normal. But we just are concerned about how this is gonna actually look in long term, as far as when all the trees are gone, and how big of a actual chicken farm area they're gonna wind up making out of this whole area. If we're gonna be inundated with 50, 60 chicken houses, or are they exclusively gonna just do 8 on this one lot, or what their grand goal is? Because nobody in our area heard nothing. We just all of a sudden out of the blue come up and found out about the rezoning, and doing investigation, we looked into it, and we found that they bought over 200-something acres in September, then turn around, it wasn't a week later, they all of a sudden got 8 permits. So is 8 gonna go 16, 32, 46, 56? How many more chicken houses are we gonna have in our area? I mean, I know we need chickens, we need eggs, we need all that, but we need to know exactly how it's gonna impact us that live right there, day in and day out. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right, does anybody else like to speak in opposition? In that case, sir, would you like to rebut? Where'd he go? Did he go?
He said no.
Oh, I can't, oh, there he is.
Yeah, he said no.
Couldn't see you back there. All right, then we will close the public portion of this request and move on to the next request. And that is for Mr. Salvador Garcia to rezone from R2 to C2, an acre and a half on South Dixie Highway in Dalton, parcel -13-00-01-000. Ethan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have a slightly different request this time, going from R2 to C2. And the request was made in order for the petitioner to be able to develop this property for his electrical business, to have a home operation, or a home base operation for his electrical company. And as of now, as it's currently zoned, no commercial use, of course, could take place on this property. And we take a look at the zoning in the area. We see the subject property on the zoning map currently shows the R2 zone district along the west right-of-way of South Dixie Highway. And then we look to the north, we also see the residential zone district. But when we look to the east and to the south, we see both the general commercial as well as that purple color, which is the heavy manufacturing zone district, which is the most intensive zone district in the Unified Zoning Ordinance. And the C2 zone district, of course, is the most intensive commercial zone district in the zoning ordinance. But we can see here that this location is not unused to commercial zoning and development, as well as industrial. And oftentimes, we see commercial development tend to locate itself near crossroads, historically crossroad communities and crossroad commercial districts. And this piece of property, the subject property, is the only tract of land at this intersection with Forest Hill Road and South Dixie Highway that is not already zoned or utilized or developed for commercial or commercial-like purposes. Next, we take a look at the aerial photograph. We can see the development in this area. You can see the manufacturing zone district there. You can see the large manufacturing properties just to the north. And you can see around the subject property. Subject property is currently undeveloped. Property to the south, very small triangular shaped property, again zone commercial. You can see it here close up is the Whitfield County Fire Station number 4. And so you can see that already exists in this area as well. So the impact of commercial and commercial-like development exists in this area. And when we look at the zoning certainly exists. Several tracts of land zoned commercial and industrial in this area. So the net effect that this rezoning could have in terms of changing the zoning map would not create a spot zone or an entering wedge or any such thing in that nature in this case, based on the fact that there's already a well-established commercial and industrial zone district in the area. And when we take a look at the future development map, you can see here we have a convergence in this area of different things occurring, and you saw the zoning map that shows industrial, commercial, and residential coming together. And here we see the suburban neighborhood character area. This is an interesting thing because we associate much of South Dixie Highway with historically being commercial and industrial. As you move south, that commercial and industrial tends to taper, and you can see the transition into residential. So that's why we see that here in the future development map. But when we take a look just to the east, you can see that industrial character area in gray. So this is an area that, of course, because of utility capacity, because of the South Dixie Highway access and proximity to the interstate highway, that this area is certainly an area that can support industrial and commercial development. When we take a look at the net effect this could have on adjacent properties, Gene, if we could go back a couple of slides to the aerial photograph right there, you can see that several of the adjacent properties, property to the west is 2 tracts of land. Those are owned by the same owner, and you can see there's a fair amount of vegetation and buffer that exists on that property. The subject property itself would be required, if it's approved, to have a minimum of a 20-foot buffer on the entire east or entire western and northern boundary. And you magnify that buffer with the existing buffers already in place on the adjacent properties. There aren't any homes in immediate proximity to the subject property that would be what you might say is next door to this operation. So there would be sufficient buffer that would be required in the zoning ordinance. It wouldn't require any type of special condition. With that in consideration, we believe that the negative impacts that could have on the residential area could be mitigated by the buffer, and that the existence and established zoning districts in the area don't raise any issues in terms of entering wedges or spot zoning. Staff recommendation is that this rezoning can be approved. Happy to answer any questions.
None? Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Garcia?
Hello, everybody. My name is Salvador Garcia. My address is 722 Pintash Lane, Dalton. A few years ago, about 2 years ago, I bought a property, and I was looking for a place to build my electrical shop, maybe 1,500, 2,000 feet. And I was looking around, and I found that property. When they advertised, they say could be changed to commercial. So that's the main reason I bought it, to build my shop, and I want to use it most as a storage for equipment and tools. So that's the reason, because most of my customers in Dalton and Calhoun, so I find that one be a perfect location to build my shop. Thank you.
Will they be coming to your shop?
No,
bring the
no,
vehicles?
no, I do more industrial, so I use pretty much for storage tools and equipment.
Who told you it could be rezoned?
They advertise it. I mean, when they don't tell me they can approve, but they say suggestion they could be changed to commercial when I bought it.
And you don't know who that, is that who you bought it from?
There was on the on the website, was present pretty much on the website. When I find the property, they say could it be changed because it's on 41, so that's the reason.
But you don't know who,
No,
Yes.
no, I don't remember, no, I don't remember.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else who'd like to speak in favor? Anybody who'd like to speak in opposition?
Hey, my name's Ryan Herbert. I live at 341 Forest Hill Circle. It is just down the road there's a ways. This picture here actually does not tell the full story. Across the road here, it says that this is industrial, correct? That's farmland. There's cattle there. It's never been developed, has you. He said this site is not a wedge, but the picture tells you everything you need to know about this wedging into our neighborhood more. Now, when you went to the next slide, that was stating that it was potentially going to be turned into suburbs. Am I mistaken on the next slide? That's the plan, the future development plan, all right? So we're going to turn what is a residential site that is future across the road going to be turned into a suburbs, and we're going to place a commercial site in the very middle of it. Also, in that picture, the person who owns that house there has a small pond that will set up against that buffer. What kind of runoff are we looking at here? What kind of property value are we looking at damaging, having this site developed? And I would just ask you, if you lived on that road and lived down through there, would you like to see that site built next to your house? That's all I have.
Thank you, sir.
My name is Steve Simmons. I own the property just west of the site there. And I do want to remind this group, regardless of what Mr. Garcia does it, if you rezone this, it can become anything in the future that would fit C2, which means it could be any number of businesses, any kind of category of filth or anything that could become part of it. But there are mainly 6 things that most of us have talked about that we'd like to object with. The first 3 critical ones are egresses. The property right now sits right across from the fire department. There's one of 2 places that you could put a driveway, either on 41 or on Forest Hill Road. The most logical place would be on Forest Hill Road. The only place you can put it, because that's a steep hill going up toward the fire department, would be right across from the fire department. So any emergency, they had to exit. If that drive was blocked for any reason, there could be loss of life or property because they couldn't access the road to get out because he's accepting a delivery or something else of that nature. The second one is the limited sight distance on that road. When you come from 41 and head up Forest Hill Road, that's a steep hill you cannot see over top of it. So once you crest that, which is where he'd have a driveway, you would have a limited sight distance for people entering that neighborhood, including firemen and others. But the most critical thing is Highway 41 itself. If you head south on 41, that is a grade hill that runs about 6 to 8% for about 500 feet, and then the site comes off of it. So when someone's coming northbound on 41, they have about 500 feet from the time they crest that hill till they hit Forest Hill Drive to turn left. Georgia DOT says that they'd like about 2.5 seconds once you have limited sight distance to be able to make a reaction in your vehicle. That particular hill, you'd take at 50 miles an hour, you'd cover about half the distance of that 500 feet. Now, that's based in dry conditions, based on flat land. However, if you're coming north on 41, you will be going down a grade 6 to 8%. If it's wet, it is very difficult to stop. Someone had to make an emergency stop because he had a customer turning that direction. A number of years ago, to the east of that, directly across, Mr. Gravely asked for a rezoning. This group and the board decided to deny that to him because of the danger it would incur of traffic on 41. And we'd like to let that be a standard for that. The next thing is the residential integrity. There is a little bit of tree buffer there. You know, you can put all the trees you want in a place, but that doesn't stop noise. It doesn't stop pollution. It doesn't stop the security issues that would offer the neighborhood. And so we would like to keep the integrity of the neighborhood. I have a petition signed by 19 residents inside that neighborhood I'd like to give you. From 16 different homes. Every single one of them had basically the same comment. They said they liked the peacefulness of our neighborhood. And so we'd like to keep it as a residential, you know, bedroom community back in there. Because maybe Mr. Garcia may not be down there at 9 o'clock at night, but if you make it C2 5 years from now, there could be a business operating at 10 o'clock at night, 11 o'clock at night, disturbing myself and some of the other neighbors. Another issue is the possibility of flooding. Majority of this property lies in a floodplain. There's a culvert that runs underneath 41 toward the back of this property. That entire property acts as a natural retention pond for the area. So if he puts a business in there, he'll have to backfill in there to have dry land to be able to run his business on. If he does that, that will back water up into the rest of the residents in that area that back up to that creek. Another issue is just the property values in there. You know, I don't know how much it would affect down the road, but I know for the place we have, we bought it because it was a large tract of land. And if you'll look the next slide. Can we see the next slide?
Which one's the
The one that has the bigger view of it.
There it is.
Okay. You'll notice that most of those tracks around myself and the others are large tracks. We bought that for the tranquility that would go in that area, that we didn't have businesses next to us, we didn't have people on top of us. We wanted kind of that removed view, but still be in a residential area. But we'd like to keep our property values. The last thing is the sewer access in there. There is no sewer. Majority of this property that would be available to put a septic system on is in the first 60, 80 feet of it. After that, it drops into the flood area, and so there's nowhere for them to put a septic system, which would mean he would have to backfill, put some sort of engineered system in it. But if it did fail, he wouldn't have the tract of land he needed to continue back with a septic system if it was him or a business that had high flow septic involved in it. Like a restaurant or something else that would go in there in the future. So for all those reasons, and primarily the danger of egress into that road and on that road to his site, we'd like to see it declined.
Thank you, sir. All right. We'll take one more. That's it.
Hi, my name is Madison Monroe. I also live at 341 Forest Hill Circle. I'm here on behalf of, I've lived in this area for 5 years, but my grandmother lives at 219 Forest Hill Road and has lived there for the past 60 years. My grandfather actually built the exact house that she is in. She buried my grandfather at 40 years old and has lived the past 25 years by herself. In this neighborhood, which has been a neighborhood where she's felt safe, went to the grocery store and accidentally left her front door still unlocked in the day and age that we have, and been perfectly fine. So as her granddaughter, I've felt comfortable with her living in this area, and I think it all stems from the fact that if it starts with one, it continues to grow. We've already had somebody move in within the last year that tried to open up a open car lot in the front of their house, just down the road from where we're talking. That brings in extra traffic, that brings in people that are just not from that neighborhood. We live in a neighborhood where we notice every single car and know who every car belongs to, and most of the people in this area have lived there exactly the same amount of time that my grandmother has. They've known me since I was little. We've known them. You know, it brings on unwanted people into our area. We already get some stragglers that walk up 41 Highway. They take a detour down our road and are walking mindlessly. It's changed. I understand it's changed over the past 60 years, and my grandmother understands that it has changed. But when you open this door for this one spot, for storage, for business, you know, there's no guarantee that it's gonna stay storage. Industrial Boulevard is just right down the road. Abutment is right over. We drive past it most every day. And there's places that can be stored for storage on those purposes where it's Industrial Boulevard and Abutment, which is all commercial. So I believe that this is residential. The people who live here love what it is and love the area right there. That way when you crest over the hill, you know, we're already right there at the fire department, let alone extra traffic and everything like that. So we're just trying to keep the area that we bought the place for. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. No, I'm gonna cut it off there.
That was Mr. Garcia.
Oh, is that Mr. Garcia? Okay, I can't, yeah, come on up. Oh, I saw it was the hat.
Yes, I just want to say, I didn't expect to be a big deal to many people, build my shop there. But I respect them, and everybody's got the right to say. I didn't agree with some point, like across from fire station number 4. They can be an issue, because it can be a house, it can be parking the car outside. It should be the same issue as a shop. But because I've seen some people don't agree, I probably don't continue to pursue try to go out, change to commercial.
Yeah, say again, please?
I just want to cancel
You want to cancel it?
yeah. I don't expect to be that way. I would expect to just fill in my letter, send it, say yes or not, but not to come and, you know.
All right, so we will deny it.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Do y'all understand that? He is withdrawing his petition. All right, moving on to the next. Eclipse Cottages is seeking to rezone from estate residential R1 to general agricultural GA tract of land, a little over 58 acres on North Doug Gap Road. I won't say the parcels, there's too many of them. Ethan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have a more unique request here than we often see, and that is the rezoning request itself seemed quite straightforward, a rezoning request from R1 to GA. And we're in somewhat of a unique area in that as we look at the zoning map, you can see that red dotted line that runs north to south. That is currently the North Doug Gap Road corridor that turns into an access easement to this property, a shared access easement. And so access to this property, even though it's very nearby, I-75, is quite limited. And we'll see in a second some more slides to show you the characteristics of this property that have created some very significant constraints in terms of potential development. As of now, this property is undeveloped. It's 3 separate tax parcels. And we can see on the property that's currently zoned, all 3 tracts R1. We look to the north and the south, we see R1 zoning as well on very large tracts. We look to the west, we see the very large general agriculture tract. So in a change to the zoning map in this case, it would expand the general agriculture zone district to the east across the subject property. And based on factors we'll get on in a minute, that limits the property's potential development or use pretty significantly. We look next at the aerial photograph. We'll look at the existing development in this area. I think this begins to tell the story that there's a lot of topographical variation in this area as you move to the west and you move up to the ridge line. When we take a look at existing development in this area, we see little to nothing in this area, with the exception of a small property to the east, which is currently occupied by a small manufacturing operation. And when we look to the south, again, undeveloped, to the north, undeveloped, to the west, undeveloped. This request was made in order to convert this property or develop this property into what we would classify as an RV park. And typically, we see RV parks, campgrounds, and things like that generally do tend to move into very low-density areas or areas with a lot of topography or wilderness and wildlife for that reason, to be detached somewhat from development. Looking at this property, there are a couple of concerns, and if we go to the next slide, we'll see, okay, we'll hit the future development map. If we can go back to that, sorry, I skipped ahead. Future development map shows this area within the Ridge Conservation Character Area, and that essentially is, of course, put in place to protect the integrity of the ridge line and the steep slopes, to make sure that any development that would occur there would, of course, mitigate any type of stormwater and runoff, because as you move into areas with a lot of topography, that becomes a much higher issue. If we move next into the aerial of the topography, here is where the story is told in the sense of this property's topography. You can see there are a few small flat areas on this property. And we say flat, relatively flat. And then you can see how close those lines are together, a significant amount of topographical variation. If we go next, we can see here that's just an illustration to show you the 3 tracts of land that the property is made up of. And of course, this property would be accessed through that shared access easement currently used by the manufacturing operation I mentioned earlier to the east. So when we look at how would changing this zoning affect the property values in this area, given the limited nature of this area and its potential to be developed, particularly for residential suburban development, extremely limited in that case. Animal husbandry is certainly not a viable land use for this property based on the topography and things, so building structures and things like that would be not impossible, but likely imprudent. So when we take a look at the impact of that, is not much concern in terms of how this could impact adjacent properties' values. What we take a look at here in the staff analysis, we received this site plan shortly after the staff analysis was completed and mailed out, but we did want to bring this forth because, as I noted in the staff analysis, that without some sort of a site plan to look at, it would be hard to determine exactly what impacts this rezoning could have at this location based on all the topography and the other factors. Obviously, with the shared access easement, it's not built to county standards in terms of public road. So where you have existing commercial traffic with the potential to meet tourists or campers that would bring their own RVs or campers, we can, of course, see some potential conflict there for competition of space in the roadway. And the other issue, of course, was topography and erosion. So we requested that we receive a site plan, something to give us an idea of exactly what portions of the property were planned to be developed for this complex and exactly what their intent was, because, of course, an RV park is a very wide and vague term, so we wanted to get some idea as to what their plans were. The petitioner can speak to certainly much more detail of exactly what their plans are, but in short, being an RV or campground, they have proposed to us that their intent would be to bring their own units, set those up, pre-built type units on a chassis, that those would be set into place. I think the word that I've been told, tiny homes, I think we've heard of tiny homes, but these are mobile units. They, of course, cannot be permanently affixed to the ground on a foundation. They have to be a mobile unit, much like a camper. So this is not a permanent, long-term resident development. This would be a short-term stay development for an RV campground. And currently, our limitations on that are no more than a 14-day consecutive stay. So just want to make sure we understand that. If the word tiny house is used, these are not houses. These would be basically campers, but they're built, of course, much like a small home would be. Their intent is to place those units on the areas in red on the site plan and cluster those units in those areas and maintain the rest of the property, of course, in green space as amenities to this development. Their planned drive for access, you can see highlighted in blue, and it travels east-west across this property to access North Dug Gap Road, the access easement adjacent to Niche. You can see there the small manufacturing development. So based on this site plan and based on their proposal, and their proposal that they submitted, sent to us, did note that their maximum number of units proposed for this property would be up to 50 units. But given the limitation of the amount of flat area or relatively flat area on which to place these units, they expect somewhere between 30 to 50 units at a final build-out. And again, their civil engineer will be here momentarily to address any issues or any questions that may come up in terms of specific plans for this development. Based on all these considerations, conditions may be necessary, conditions to consider. We do have a site plan now as one of the conditions that was recommended. The next would be to either limit the size of the camper or RV units, to limit the issues mentioned earlier with competition for roadway. Again, that's not the intent of the developer. The developer petitioner plans to place their units there, leave those units there in place, and rent those units over time. But with any rezoning, as we know, the ability for them to have an RV or a campground on this location would remain in perpetuity, and a future owner could choose to allow people to bring their own campers to and from the property, which again could create some competition on that easement. So placing a limit to the total number of units would be a recommendation, as well as a limit to the size of the RVs or campers permitted to access this property. Staff recommendation, however, is that this rezoning request can be approved, provided that conditions are placed on the property that can mitigate any concerns. And of course, any development would be required to follow any stormwater and erosion control. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Ethan,
Ethan,
go ahead.
what did you say about the 14-day stay?
This would be limited to short-term stay only, so no person could stay in any of these units for more than 14 consecutive days.
So my question was, how is that monitored? How, I mean, what mechanism is there to ensure that these just, they don't turn into extended stay, you know, similar to a mobile home park? I mean, who makes that call and says, hey, this is not being, you know, handled the right way?
That would be code enforcement.
That'd be hard to do, wouldn't it? And how do you know when somebody checked in and when they leave?
They have to have a specific license, even though it's in the county, to operate. And if this were in the city, that'd be structured more,
Right. It would be required to have a business license in this
just a
case.
business license.
I don't know, maybe the petitioner can answer some of this.
All right,
Ethan, was there also a typo on this one where it says cannot approve?
Yes.
Seem to have a trend here.
that was before you
Apologize for
had
that.
the,
That was before we had the site plan, so that
Oh.
was to hold off. We didn't approve
Put
it.
it on hold.
Didn't want to give a blanket approval until we got the site plan. We received that after the staff analysis.
Okay.
Anybody else? Okay, thank you, Ethan.
Thank you.
All right,
Good evening. My name's Jamie McCutcheon. Address is 198 Creekwalk Drive, Travelers Rest, South Carolina. Appreciate the opportunity to be here this evening and try to explain a little bit more what our plan is. First off, let me say we recognize the topography and challenges here, and our intent is to maintain that as much as possible. One of the advantages of tiny homes, and I'll use tiny homes versus RVs kind of interchangeably, but they're really high-end campers that are gonna stay in place. The unit will stay there long-term, but we're looking at sort of an eco-tourism type of location here. We're gonna take advantage of what you're maintaining, is the tranquility, and you're balancing growth and keeping the character of the area. Makes it very attractive for folks to come in and visit. And so that's the intent here, is that where there's a, weekend stay or maybe a week-long stay, it'd be a place where, and I don't know if you're familiar with tiny home developments or not, if there've been any others in the vicinity. They're relatively new. We've done several of them. I was engineer for the first one in Greenville County in Travelers Rest. And it took a while for people to overcome the fears of what it might be, just like you said, is long-term stays and stuff.
Can I ask you where that's at? My son plays football at Furman, so
Okay.
I'm over there
So
every
it's-
weekend.
It's not far. So if you go up to 76 to where the Greenville Hospital system is, we're right off the Swamp Rabbit Trail. So it's kind of tucked back in. It's called Creek Walk. So it's tucked back in off of 276, about 300-400 yards, somewhere in there. Our office is right off 276 on the Swamp Rabbit Trail, right in front of this development. But we manage it, so we've got some other developments in the works as well. We have a management company. They're the ones who will manage the stays. It'll be sort of similar to, not an apartment, but maybe a hotel type management system. So we're tracking who's in and out. The advantage here is you've got your own little place. You don't have somebody in the room next to you. You're not hearing that. You're separate. You've got your own place for your car. Usually we have some fire pits or grills or that kind of stuff. But it's really an ecotourism where you're coming in to really enjoy the nature that's here. That top area on the site plan with the blue line to it, that's not going to be units. We can't get units up there. That's really going to be maybe a pavilion if we can figure out how to build that there, but more just like to hike up to, walking trail to get there, be able to enjoy the views that you would have from that area. Be very limited tree taken out. These units are about 8 feet wide by 16 feet long. They are on wheels, but they're on jacks, and so the wheels are off the ground, so they stay in place permanently. That allows us to sneak them in beside trees, do very limited clearing, really maintain the character of the area while we're doing this. So,
What's a typical rental rate for those?
it varies seasonally. During peak fall season, it's probably over $200 a night. Normal rates around $100 a night. So these are not low-end, cheap type things. They're, if you're familiar with Greenville, what we find is the people that are renting those are sort of it's a step down from the cliffs. It's people that want to come in and enjoy the Swamp Rabbit Trail, enjoy the amenities, the local breweries and shopping and small shop kind of stuff. But Travelers Rest is a very, relatively small town outside of Greenville. And they're coming to do that versus coming to, spend several $1 million on a home that's up in the cliffs area. But that's the attraction for that area. We see the same opportunity here where people want to come here, they want to visit. They may not be fortunate enough to be able to live here, but they want to come in and enjoy what you have.
Will you have, obviously you'll have power?
Yes, sir. They'll have power. Actually, our units all have solar roofs. So we're working to build a self-contained, I call it kind of the perfect hunting lodge with its own water and sewer system. We're not quite there with this. This will have a septic system there. We will have to extend water to the sites. We plan to do that. They'll have power as backup, but these all do have solar roofs. Now, we keep so many trees, the solar doesn't work, perfectly, but it is an advantage to the property management that we have a very small power bill.
But there is water in the area?
There's water on North Gap Road. We're gonna have to probably extend it down the gravel portion there. And there was a comment in the staff report about competing traffic. Again, these come in one time and they stay there. Over a couple of years, we may have one that has a problem, have to get swapped out or something, but they're generally there for the long haul. And I know this is new, so please, if you have any questions, I'm happy to try to answer. I'm not sure what questions you might have. I've tried to guess a little bit, but Ethan, do we have the picture that was sent? I don't know if you were provided that we sent some information with some photos of the actual units on the inside and out. I don't know if you've seen those, and I apologize. I didn't know I was coming here instead of Mr. Draplin until Friday, and I house full of family and did not have a chance to put the PowerPoint together this morning before I hit the road to get here. So, but they're, you know, typically we have stainless steel appliances, granite countertops. You know, it's a high-end, just happens to be very small.
Do you do Airbnbs with those, or is that?
We have a mixture of Airbnb versus our own rental, but Airbnb's a easier way for us to get the rentals.
Because I see, we stay in them over there all the time, and I see those things.
Yep.
On the Airbnbs, on the Swamp Rabbit Trail, all the time.
And they're really nice. If you're just coming there as a couple or maybe a small family, I mean, you probably won't have more than 2 people, maybe one or a small child or something. You know, I've got 2 teenagers. I wouldn't stay in a 400 square foot with one bed with, you know, they're not gonna sleep on the couch. So it's a lifestyle kind of thing. It's coming around, not for everybody, but the people that are in it are just, you know, they really love it and take advantage of it.
So it's not really like an RV park that's listed on here?
No, ma'am. We don't allow you to bring your own RV in. So that will not be allowed. We'll set up limited spaces. Like I said, I'm the civil engineer. Once we get the zoning approved, assuming if it does get approved by the commission, then we would do a detailed study, figure out exactly what we do. We walk the property, we stake out where we're gonna put the units, have that surveyed. So we try to, you know, get our boots on the ground, look at what trees we wanna make sure we keep, work around all that. You know, it's relatively small roads, just big enough to get the tiny homes in place.
He had said 30 to 50 campers. Is that what you're thinking too?
It gets confusing because these are regulated as RVs, so people think in terms of campers, but it's 30 to 50 units is how many we would have there. And so these would be, typically they're like a main floor with a little bit of a loft area, maybe the bed's up top or a second bed is up top, or maybe some storage. But
It's not a Coachman that you put behind your F-150 that they're putting over there. I mean, it's.
They're hardy
yeah.
plank siding on the exterior, you know, nice trim, nice casings. You think of a pretty, I mean, the cost of these things is about $300 a square foot.
We found you on the internet.
Okay.
Hey, so we'll pass that along.
So it is a extremely high-end, and we're marketing to the folks that want to spend $200 a night to come in and enjoy fall when the leaves are changing, and be able to go on a hike trail. We've got, and probably, I'm not sure if it's a national park or just owned by the government behind us, but this site, the owner of this site came to us. They said, we want to do a sustainable development. And they reached out to us and said, we think that what you do would work here, and so that's how we got here.
Any other questions?
Okay.
All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Anybody else like to speak in favor? Anybody like to speak in opposition? Step on up.
Try to keep this to a couple of hours, I guess, but I represent Niche and the concerns that we have about this development of the property. And I really just want to make these notes as part of the record. And well, I understand and appreciate the kind of development you're looking to make, and certainly stayed in those kinds of developments in the past, and can appreciate that. I don't know that this property actually lends itself well to that for the reasons that Ethan discussed. If you've walked the property, and I don't know that you have, and you looked at that topography map, which I'm glad you included because it is extreme, you can have a really difficult time even trying to walk up that property. And the current property owners have tried to do a bit of development in the past and have found challenges already, and that's why they're not there anymore in part, or trying to get rid of this property. But my concerns are, first, with the ingress and egress of the property on that small access road that is a private road that Niche maintains and has for 22 years. We're concerned about additional traffic. Understand the development and the construction would be somewhat, but also just the ongoing traffic of having another 20 to 30 to 50 vehicles each weekend or every workday coming in and out of that property. That current easement is a 20-foot access easement. In the narrowest parts, it's only about 14 feet wide, and we have commercial trucks daily in and out, up to 10, 12 trucks a day, both 53-foot trucks as well as 26-foot box vans. as well as about 50 staff members for niche that work there daily, coming in and out. We currently run 2 shifts and are very possibly going to, if the economy holds, we'll certainly look to expand that to 3 shifts over time, and may actually open up the rest of our site for additional warehousing and so forth, production capabilities. So there may be an opportunity for us to open up the rest of our site for additional building as our needs are necessary. One of those concerns that we have is the ingress and egress and the narrow road, and it can be difficult just trying to get vehicles in and out of that road at times. I've had to stop and wait for a FedEx truck to come up that road or an XDS truck to come up that road, and have seen problems when people come up and down that road before. Safety concerns for recreational traffic, and we see this every year now because we have a lot of deer hunters that stop along the road. And I know that if we pull this kind of traffic for people staying in that area, one of the draws for that area is the Pinhoti Trail. So those people may want to well get out and hike those trails and access those areas, but they can't do so along that road. That current road is simply, as noted, a gravel road. And like I said, it's only about 14 to 20 feet wide at any point. We've maintained that every year at a cost of about $20,000 to $25,000 a year for niche. We're concerned about the additional traffic there and the additional maintenance cost of that road, the additional upkeep of that road, and how those costs would fall out in the end of this. So we would like to talk to the developer about how those get addressed. The property, my statement here was that the property under consideration has significant topographical challenges for development. The concern is to provide sufficient parking, and that's another area, not just the ingress and egress, but with all these additional vehicles coming up into that area, we need sufficient parking for them, which I'm sure that if you've got a tiny home there, you've got to give them a place to park their vehicle. But I'm telling you, that access is not easy. It's you go off of that road and you immediately go up into that. So that would be a concern for the parking. Certainly we can't impede niche's current parking access. And the last portion, well, 2 additional portions we're concerned about are just what we stated earlier in terms of maintaining the standards of the community. Not really concerned for the properties this gentleman's talking about developing. Certainly they seem to have a good reputation and high standards for their communities. But as we've discussed throughout this meeting tonight, once we make those changes to zoning, then we don't know what can happen in the future and what control we can have over those developments in the future. And then lastly, we have a serious concern about erosion and water runoff, and we need to have some definite discussion about that. The limited amount of development that's already been done by the existing property owner has created already some problems for us in putting a lot more water and a lot more erosion onto our property. And there are several springs in their property. And currently niche operates off a deep water well, which would be no less than probably 30 to 50 feet off the existing development in some areas along that larger red area to the right there just above niche. So that would certainly be a concern for us as well. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak in opposition? If we can keep it short. You got the paperwork?
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Noah Breitweiser. I'm from 655 Champaign Trail, Dalton, Georgia. That was my father who just spoke. One of the many concerns that we have, he talked about previously, was the egress and just the traffic coming in and out of there. With just the limited traffic that we have going in and out of there now, with those 52-foot trucks, is quite a bit. It's going to be a lot more than that if that development was being able to be built, for the simple fact that, yes, North Georgia is very pretty, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you want to be cooped up in a cabin all day. You're going to want to leave at some point. You want to explore the rest of what North Georgia has to offer while you're up here. Also, these properties are or this property is extremely close to the forest preserve, and the developer talked about possibilities of having fire pits and whatnot, with the topography slope, especially. Any escaped fire that has the potential to become a wildfire at that point, traveling up there, fire travels 16 times faster uphill. And we all saw that map. It's got the potential to become very big very quickly. And to get on that National Forest Service land would just be a tragedy, especially. So those are some of the concerns, as well as what we talked about, the water quality issue. As it stands now, there's quite a bit of water quality issues with the little development that's already there. There would possibly be more, hopefully not. But Georgia, I know, is very serious about its water quality issues, and they take that very seriously, and we'd hate to see that have any more impact on anybody else.
Thank you.
Hello, my name's Bill Brown, 1002 Lacey Lane, Dalton, Georgia. And I'm here, my property actually borders the property that they want to develop the RV park on. I've got a little over 77 acres. That is just, we can go to the aerial view, yeah, just to the north is my property there. They have spoke much about my concerns. Fire is definitely a concern. My property goes up to almost the top of Pinhoti Trail. I've got a cabin up there actually, and actually it's so hilly, cutting the road up there is about a mile to get up there because you had to twist and turn. So it is very hilly up there. Some of the concerns I've got is water runoff. I've got a lake that is spring fed. My concern is when they start doing all the cutting, bulldozing, that kind of stuff, as you heard, there's many springs on that property. You know, how's that going to affect everything else? Another concern is just on the other side of the interstate, you've got a lot of subdivisions. I know when I stop my lake from the leaves and all on the overflow, it feeds right across the interstate into those subdivisions. So my concern is what they're going to get as well during all the work and developmental work they have. Trespassing, you know, if you've got someone different up there every 14 days coming on the property, we enjoy hunting on our property, fishing on our property. Like I said, we've got a cabin on the top. You know, I'd have to call these guys, you know, the sheriff department with things going on. Hopefully that would never come, but that's a concern that I have. So I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Sir, on the come to rebut.
I just start off say I appreciate to hear their concerns. As far as the road access goes, I don't know the details of the access easement, but we would be just as interested in keeping it well-maintained as the niche company that's there, and be happy to work with them. I'm sure in order for this to actually happen, and again, y'all understand zoning's one of the first steps. There's a lot of work to do after that before it actually comes to fruition. One of those will be ironing out that access easement, maintenance agreements, and so on. And so I drove it myself, passed a couple of cars there. It is narrow. You know, if we can widen it and work with them to widen it a little bit so we can get cars by, that's great. If we can't, then that's just one of the restrictions on, you know, people getting in and out there. It's very low speed, so it's rough enough. You're not gonna go very fast. As far as stormwater runoff, I'm a licensed engineer in South Carolina, North Carolina, and Georgia, have been for almost 30 years now. I actually have a manufacturing company that makes stormwater and erosion control devices as well. So we will take every effort here to make sure we protect the environment and the streams that are there. One of the advantages of what we're doing it doesn't take much grading. You're talking about leveling things out just a foot or two, even though it's very steep. We're only be looking at the flat areas, and we're gonna protect everything that's steep. So you're gonna see minimal, I understand the companies there talking about expanding. I do, engineering for industrial as well. They're talking about major earthwork to be able to fit in a larger building or lay down yard or whatever they do. No problem with that, as long as you do it well. We're talking about doing very, very minimal work in order to get this project in place. I think that was the main comments I heard, but if there's any other questions or comments I need to address, I'll be happy to do so.
No, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
That said, I think we can close the public portion on this issue. We do have one more for the county. And this one is a modification. Brian Spence is requesting to rezone from residential R5 for modifications that were put in place September the 12th on 1.65 acres at 623 Hill Road. Ethan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We'll look at the map here. We can see the subject property. Again, it's zoned R5. This request that was made, while it requires a zoning action, is not a rezoning, conventional rezoning, where we'd be going from one zone district to another. The underlying R5 zone district would remain in place as it was before. The petitioner's request was in order to change one of the conditions placed on the property, and that condition was the limit of 4 driveways to the subject property. And the reason that was placed on this property was particularly to limit the number of driveways along the, let's see, that would be Wagner Drive. And essentially, there are 2 existing driveways on Hill Road. That limitation didn't take that into consideration in the original condition, and the petitioner's request would be able to continue to keep the limit of 4 driveways along Wagner Drive, but to retain the existing 2 driveway access points along Hill Road. We can see that illustrated here as where those driveways are proposed, the existing and the proposed. Of course, several of these tracts of land would be sharing driveways. You can see those splitting between lot lines. And so the net effect of this in terms of zoning and development is that, again, the zoning would not change. Zoning in place would remain in place as R5. The net density would not change in this case. This would essentially allow the 2 additional points of access on this property. And again, the original point of this recommendation or the condition on this property was to limit access along Wagner Drive. This access would remain limited if this condition adjustment will be approved, because in that condition, you'll note that in that condition, the limitation of driveways along Wagner Drive is still 4 driveways. So this does include that separation. Staff recommendation is that this can be approved based on the fact that it would not change the nature of this property, but would allow for the additional driveways, separate driveways along Hill Road. Recommendation is to approve, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
No. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Spence, I think this is fairly simple, but you may want to come up and answer some questions. I don't think there are going to be many.
Brian Spence, 1387 New Hope Church Road, Tunnel Hill, Georgia. Basically, I just want to use the aprons that the county had already put in on Hill Road there. There's one right in front of the house. I mean, it makes all the sense in the world to use it. The other, let's see, lot 8, I need a separate driveway for it because of power poles and stuff. And then lot 6 and 7 can share. And then lot 5, there was a power pole in the way too there, so that one's already in, and then lot 2 and 3 already share a driveway. I've already built, lots 2, 3, 4, 5, and we're working on lot 1. So 6, 7, and 8 is the issue. I like to be able to share lot 6 and 7 together and have 8 as a single driveway. And then,
Now, those 4 were already approved, right?
yeah,
Just not the placing?
they're just not the placing, and at the time, they sprung it on me 30 minutes before the meeting, and I did agree to the 4 driveways, and on paper it works, and in reality it don't.
But those right there basically have been approved on Wagner Drive, or 4 were approved on Wagner Drive, right?
Well, they was.
Just not the place.
4 for the total 8, for the whole parcel is what they were saying. And I took it as there's 4 on Wagner, because there's already 3 aprons on, 2 on Hill and 1 on Wagner in. Already, the county had put them aprons in. It's common sense to use them, I mean, but that's what it is.
All right. Well, thanks, sir. I don't think we need any further discussion on that. Okay.
Anybody in opposition?
Who's that? Oh,
I would like to say, yeah.
of course.
I think the original point of limiting 4 driveways was because the concerns about traffic there, and that was what I was hearing a lot about, and I don't really see that that's changed. That area is high traffic if you go to it, and the 4 driveways there that was something that it was done to try to mitigate that traffic concern, and adding those additional 2 driveways, which was outside of the original agreement, it's going to open back up that concern, which is what we were working so hard to mitigate in the beginning.
On a different road.
No, on the entire site. I mean, the limitation of the 4 driveways, my understanding was, and I mean, as Mr. Spence pointed out, that felt kind of rushed, and it was hard to know what was going on with that, but 4 driveways was supposed to be 4 driveways total, not 4 driveways except for add those other 2 in. That wasn't what I understood. And I don't think that was what everybody else understood. And so we just want to see that the original agreement holds. That's what we want to see. Thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
So there's 8 houses there regardless, correct?
Yeah, there are 8 houses.
So there's 8 houses.
I can't bite my tongue because somebody, you weren't even here.
Okay.
He was on another thing, and, I mean, everybody going constantly on everybody's stuff. This lady's been by my property. This is what I do for a living. I don't go to y'all's job and say, hey, he don't need to eat this week, you know.
Brian, just a sec. Okay.
Can I, anyway, Brian, so there's 8 houses that are gonna be there either way, right? Yeah. So you still got traffic from 8 houses either coming out of 4 driveways or 6 driveways, right? Okay,
And
just wanna make sure.
4 of them are on Wagner Drive, and 2 of them are gonna be on Hill, right?
But still same number of houses, the
Same number of
density's the same.
Okay. No other questions? We're gonna move on. Gentlemen, this is where, wait a minute.
Yeah, there was a mistake made on the application of the next. The applicant filed it was within the city. We determined that it was not within the city. And then that was not within the
Sit back there.
Sit down, Barry.
Okay. Next request is to hear from Earl Ellerton to rezone from commercial C2 to single-density family R2 on 1911 Doug Yap Road in Dalton in the county.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a straightforward request, requesting to take a subject property which is currently developed with a single-family detached dwelling. It is non-conforming because it has a single-family dwelling on a property zoned for general commercial use. The request in this case is simply to rezone this property from C2 to R2 in order to bring it into conformity. Of course, we see this issue come up time and time again in the sense that individuals can't receive mortgages or things like that with properties zoned commercial, even if they contain a non-conforming single-family dwelling. You can see R2 is the prominent zone district in this area, and there would be absolutely no negative impact to the surrounding properties if this rezoning is approved. If we look at the development in the area, we'll see that that development is certainly a mix of residential and commercial. We see the dominant use, of course, being residential. And of course, we see no issues with the comprehensive plan in the suburban neighborhood character area. Again, very straightforward rezoning with no anticipated negative impact. Recommendation from staff is this one can certainly be approved. Happy to answer any questions.
No questions? No questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Ellerton?
I'm Greg Silvers, 1919 Doug Gap Road, Dalton, Georgia. I'm Mr. Ellison's son-in-law and also representing him as his POA. The property's currently lived in, has been lived in by the same person for over the past 8 or 10 years. I think when Mr. Ellison purchased the property, he purchased what was a gun store, or it's been a grocery store. It's been everything for several years through there. And when he purchased that, the house come with it, so that's why it was considered commercial. And then now the young lady is in the process of buying it. It's a FHA loan, and we know how strict they are, so had to walk a few tight ropes to get everything in line. So.
At one point in time, I think somebody was operating a hair barber shop.
Well,
Is that still in effect?
No, it's right now. It's operated by WBR Sawin, who is a construction company that, goes in plants and saws concrete and does commercial work there. Also, he had a gun store in one side of it, which they've since shut that down. So.
But right now, the house does not have.
The house is not
a business operation.
Not business operation, and really quite a bit, there's a good bit of space between them.
All right. Questions?
Thank you.
None? Thank you, sir. Anybody else would like to speak in favor? Anybody like to speak in opposition? That said, that closes the public portion on there, and the commissioners will be leaving us. And we're going to take a 5-minute break. We'll be right back.
I don't know, it's on this.
My daughter used to live in a tiny house for 2 years, built it herself. Yeah, tiny home.
I've watched some of those. It's definitely not for me.
This is a little different.
I mean, beautiful proof photos. So I think that follows what people like haul it somewhere and live there for 6 months and then go live somewhere.
Oh, yeah.
There may be one back here.
Well, Bert gets some stuff.
So we got 6 instead of 5. Everybody else ready to go? All right. Let's get back to it. All right, we do have three more items to deal with. The first one is Maria Aguilar to rezone from R2 to R6, a little over a quarter acre on 800 Lucky Street. Ethan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You can see the subject property, currently R2, and you can see the two different zone districts in this area that come together at this location, and that's the R3 and R2, so medium density and low density, single family. And we may be familiar with this area as part of sort of the Crown Mill Village of residential homes built back when the Crown Cotton Mill was in operation. This property formerly did have a single-family dwelling on it. It's been demolished now for a number of years, it appears. And the petitioner's request is to go to transitional residential, which would allow them to build up to a quadplex. Their request notes that they would like to build up to a triplex. We visited this property and looked around, and of course there's several issues to consider in terms of that amount of density at this location, that being that the majority of land around this property, or all the land surrounding this property, is single-family detached. We do see in this area throughout the Crown Mill Village several islands of multifamily, duplexes, triplexes, small apartments. We see one of those very near the subject property to the east. So it is not entirely uncommon to have some limited multifamily within the Crown Mill Village. But again, the triplex, we believe R6 zoning would be a little bit more than would be appropriate for this location. And when we look at the existing development on the next slide, you can see rooftops in this area, again, mostly single-family detached. I will say that the majority of properties within, especially the R2 zone district, are going to be non-conforming. They're either going to be under 1,200 square feet, they're going to be encroaching on setbacks, or have a lot size smaller than required in R2. So it is a higher density area for the most part. In looking at this request, the recommendation from the staff analysis is that not to approve R6, but to consider R5 as an opportunity here to allow for either subdivision development, able to divide out tracts of land for single-family detached development of a slightly higher density that would be similar to what we see in this area, or would allow the petitioner to build a duplex, a single duplex on the subject property. We believe that it could accommodate a duplex, but do not believe it could accommodate a triplex, and we do not believe there would be a negative impact if the property was developed with a duplex. Recommendation is to approve an R5 rezoning, or consider R5 rezoning for this request, but not to approve the R6 rezoning. Happy to answer any questions.
That's it. Thank you. Maria Aguilar?
My name is Sebastian Alvarez. We live at 210 West Matilda Street. I'm going to be speaking for her. We've been living here for about 13 years now, right next to that property. Actually, it's our house. And we just figured, we know the place really well. There's people's good. It's a nice area. We figured it'll be good for a duplex or a triplex, which is what we were trying to do. But yeah.
So what he's recommended is R5, which would allow you to do a duplex rather than a triplex. Are you okay with that?
If the R6 isn't possible, then yes, we're fine with the duplex, if that's what's recommended.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody else like to speak in favor? Anybody like to speak in opposition? That said, we would close the public portion on that request and move on to the next one. Tammy Herndon is requesting to rezone from low-density, single-family R2 to limited commercial C1A, 0.39 acres at 207 Jones Street in Dalton. This is in the city. Ethan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You can see here the request here from R2 to C1A. We see the subject property in the center of the map. This request was being made out of the petitioner's desire to be able to build townhouses on the subject property. They indicated that they would like to be able to build up to 10 units on this property of fee simple townhouses. The property right now consists of 2 tracts of land, each containing a single-family detached dwelling. And when we take a look at the adjacent development and zoning in this area, again, this request is requesting C1A. When we look to the north, the east, and the south, we see the C1A zone district well established. In fact, when we look to the north, you'll see the old jail site, and those of you probably, it's hard to miss lately that the old jail has been raised and that there will be an apartment complex constructed on that location. We also see City Park School to the east, and to the south of the property on those 2 tracts zoned C1A. They're not used for commercial purposes. They are developed for duplexes. There are 2 duplexes on 1 duplex each on each of those parcels. So we see multifamily well established in this area, and we see the C1A district very common. In fact, it borders the subject property on 3 flanks. When we look at what impact this could have on the adjacent properties, of course, this zone district was created in a way to buffer between the downtown central business district and residential developments just like this, particularly to the west, as well as along Thornton Avenue, where that transition goes from commercial to residential. In C1A, you can have a very limited number of commercial uses, limited retail, things to that nature. And the types of buildings that are built there have to be similar to residential structures. So the idea is that people that convert residential structures for multifamily or for commercial purpose don't change the built environment of the area. It still maintains a residential feature even if multifamily or even if commercial uses are taking place there. So it's intended to be that buffer transitional zone district. There would be a buffer required if this was approved to the west where there are existing single-family detached dwellings. And the subject property, the petitioner, again, has requested up to 10 fee simple townhouses. Fee simple townhouses do have an owner-occupied status, so they subdivide off you on the land and the unit, even though the units are attached. It's referred to as single-family attached development. And based on some number crunching and some measurements per our ordinance, the actual number of units that they will likely be able to develop there is going to be no more than 6, based on the amount of setbacks and separation and average width of each of those units, based on the requirements in the UZO for townhouses. Staff recommendation is to approve based on no conflict seen with the comprehensive plan, the existing development in the area, or the zoning map. We believe that this is a perfectly viable use for this property in the reasonable zone district. It would make the zoning map consistent and would remain a good buffer between the single-family properties and the commercial and multifamily. Happy to answer any questions.
Nope, no questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Herndon?
Hello, I'm Tammy Herndon, and my address is 2135 Chatham. He pretty much said what we want to do with them, so we own the property across the street, which is the Shaw Living Lab, and we renovated that building, so it made sense for us to take the one across the street and hopefully build some really nice apartments.
Your request had 10 fee simple, and he's suggesting that there only could be
It depends
6.
on how the setbacks are. I mean, before we put a lot of money into it, we wanted to see if it could get rezoned, and then we're gonna have an architect draw and see how many units can actually fit based on the setbacks.
It's
So-
fairly small, yeah.
Yeah.
No other questions? Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else would like to speak in favor? Anybody like to speak in opposition? That said, this closes the public portion on that item. And we do have one left. James Suttles is seeking to rezone from medium-density single-family residential R3 to commercial C1, .11 acres at 842 McAfee Street in Dalton, another city item.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We can see the subject property in the center of the map lying at the crossroads, McAfee and Bogle Street. And this request is in order to utilize the subject property for additional parking for the adjacent business to the west, which was rezoned a year or two ago. And we can see here, we do have an island of commercial zoning in this area for neighborhood commercial. But the intent of the neighborhood commercial zone is to create that neighborhood commercial or crossroad commercial environment where people in the area can have a commercial business in the area that they can go to quickly and conveniently. And oftentimes, I mentioned before, these type of developments tend to favor crossroads. So we see that at this area. In fact, that property that's adjacent to the west that was already rezoned has had a commercial building on it for quite a number of decades. And one of the reasons it was rezoned was because it was non-conforming and was a property, was perfectly viable commercial property. It was rezoned to neighborhood commercial. One of the issues with that property was that it did have a very limited amount of parking. And because no parking is allowed, on-street parking on McAfee Street, created a little bit of an issue with this property long-term. So when we take a look next at the existing development of this property, it helps to kind of tell the story. And next, we'll take a look at the slide showing a close-up, and we'll see that the subject property does have a single-family detached dwelling, but you'll note its proximity to that commercial building to the west is a mere few feet away. So it's a non-conforming structure on this property based on the fact it doesn't meet the setbacks and is certainly heavily impacted by that commercial building to the west. This would create an opportunity for the petitioner to utilize this property for additional parking, which would certainly create more than ample parking for this property in the future and allow the continued use of this commercial building at this location. If we take a look at the comprehensive plan, this is in the town neighborhood revitalization character area. And within this character area, neighborhood commercial uses are a proposed land use as long as they're not in conflict with the established development pattern. And again, I mentioned this commercial building to the west has existed there for quite a number of decades. So this would not change the pattern of development in this area. It would help to remove a non-conforming property, bring it into conformity with the adjacent property, and provide for that amount of parking so that there's no issue with individuals trying to illegally park on the street. And staff analysis is to approve. And of course, I forgot to mention buffers would be required along the southern portion of this property where it's adjacent to other residential property. So that would be in place as they begin to make improvements to this property. And because it's within the city, they would be required to provide paved parking or cement parking. So they can't just gravel this area. It'll have to be properly developed, and they'll have to deal with, of course, all the stormwater regulations, setbacks, and so forth that accommodate parking. I'm happy to answer any questions.
No? Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Suttles?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and the board. I've been in Dalton.
You
I
are
guess-
Mr. Suttles,
Oh,
correctly?
I am James Suttles Senior. I live on 3205 Hedrick Circle, southeast Dalton, Georgia.
Good, thank you.
And I've been here quite some years, since '69. And I'm a barber by profession. And what I did, I went and built a building of 2,000 square feet because I wanted to bring businesses to the community there. And so I've had businesses in there, but they wouldn't stay because no parking, not enough parking there. And so I run a little barber shop there now. And so I bought a house next to my shop off the courthouse steps. And so I bought it to enlarge my parking space. So his friends told me, you make a little money if you rent it out. So I did that. So I become conclusion that I need more space so I can have more businesses in my building. And so that's why I wanted to, see about having my parking lot increased. Thank you.
Understand? Any questions? All right, thank you, sir.
Okay.
Anybody else like to speak in favor? Anybody like to speak in opposition? That said, that closes the public portion on that request and closes the public portion of this meeting. We will now go into our regular meeting and deliberate on each of these issues. They also requested that we speak in the mic, so it's recorded.
All right.
So,
Okay.
yeah. All right, going back to the first one, Charles Smith.
Requested, we deny.
Okay, that is denied.
I make a
Anybody wants to- Who,
He made the motion, I second.
David makes a motion, Chris seconds. To deny, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. It is denied. The next one is to hear the request of Q Wilkins. This is the one on Old Dixie Highway. Okay, this is chicken coops and zoning.
Ethan or Jean, is there any kind of regulation on the number of chicken houses that you can do? I mean, if you own the property, they said he'd petition for 8, but can he petition for 8 more, just like the gentleman said? So you can put an unlimited number, but
Mhm. But on this property, this particular site is wedged between two sites
that would allow
would
the exact same
already
thing.
allow for it, right?
And I'm also assuming there's nothing we can do as far as a buffer to make the folks along George Brock Road feel any better because they're not asking for a rezoning on that property.
At least that property isn't.
It's in the middle of the other property. I make a motion that we approve.
Okay, Jody makes a
Fighting
motion.
staff recommendation.
Staff analysis, Jody makes recommendation,
I mean,
agree. So that's a motion?
yes, make a motion
That is
to approve.
first motion. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
David seconds. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it unanimously. Okay, Salvador Garcia,
He withdrew.
another withdrawal.
Move, yep, second.
David first, Chris seconds to deny. All in favor for denial, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? It is denied. Okay. Clips Cottages. This is the tiny homes. Seems like they're willing to work on the road. Question is,
I mean, there's limited infrastructure that's there from the current owner or previous owner. He tried to do something in the past. Limited soil disturbance because they pretty much roll these things in and level them up with jacks.
Mhm.
You know, they're not having to get it to grade. You know, I think if they work out something on the road, you know, and you've got the developer who is unlike most developers in the fact that he's a stormwater engineer and, you know, I mean, it's not, so, you know, he's got to meet all of the criteria there.
he understands the boxes to be checked.
Got a track record, quality product, you know, it's something that we don't have in this area. And they're not going to go put 30 or 50 of these things in there day one. They're going to put them in as the market allows, you know, for that to happen. I move we approve it.
Motion is approval. Is there a second?
Second.
Jody seconds. All in favor of approving this request, say aye.
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 All opposed? The ayes have it.
Because the road's out of our scope anyway.
Do I
right?
now?
The road is out of our scope anyway. That's what the city council will have to figure out, or
Yeah.
the county commissioners.
County, Okay, that was uniform zoning. Okay. Modification for Brian Spence. He's wanted to go from, well, the first approval was a minimum of 10-foot vegetated buffer. That's agreed to on the second one. The difference is the number of driveways to 4. He wants 4 along Wagner Drive and 2 along Hill Road.
So the density's the same as far as number of homes. It's 8.
Mhm.
There's already county paid-for aprons on the other, not Wagner, but is it Hill Road?
Hill.
You know, the traffic's gonna be the same
Mhm.
coming out of there, whether it's out of 4 or out of 6. It makes more sense to me to have the 6, particularly they're already there.
Right. He's only adding the ones on Hill Road.
Correct. It doesn't change the fact there's still gonna be 8 houses there,
Mhm.
you know?
4 that were already approved.
And they're approved, yeah. Just this modification to 6 driveways.
Or just to maintain the 2 that are already there.
Yeah.
Have a motion? Chris?
I move we approve.
I'll second.
David seconds. All in favor to approve this change, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. Okay, Earl Ellerton, seeking to rezone 1919 Doug Gap Road from C2 to R2. Seems like a slam dunk.
Yeah. Motion.
Second.
Motion to approve.
David, and then Chris. The motion is to approve this one. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. Christopher Maria Aguilar, requesting rezone from R2 to R6, 800 Lucky Street. This is one they want to do a triplex. We would,
But they said they'd be okay with R5, so
so,
I recommend R5.
Would second that motion.
you got that, Ethan? All in favor of approving as R5 and not R6, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it as R5. Okay. Tammy Herndon. These are the 207 Jones Street, right across from City Park School. It's talking 10 simple fee townhouses.
Probably gonna end up being less.
Probably gonna be less.
But move we approve.
Second.
Yeah.
Chris and then David, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. I mean, I really don't think they're gonna fit. 6 is gonna be tight.
Yeah.
Okay, James Suttles.
Move we approve.
Chris moves, we approve.
Second.
Jody has to
They-
second this
no,
time.
No, it's fine. They're on a roll.
David seconds. All in favor, say aye. All opposed? The ayes have it. Excellent. We have got one.
What's the other?
We just can't get out of here.
Yeah, y'all just gave me the sticky one.
Huh?
They gave me the sticky one.
One quick plat in the county if you guys are ready for it.
Sure.
You see where on your screens where Cedar Ridge Elementary is located?
Yes.
On Cedar Ridge Road. This property is a long rectangle out on Burgess Drive. Michael Young is the property owner. It currently had 2 houses on the property. Michael has torn down the one back on the north side. And what he wants to do is subdivide this property so that he can build a duplex on this flag lot. And because it's a flag lot, has to be approved by you guys. Have two houses, it's gonna end up with two structures at the end of the day. One's gonna be a duplex and one's gonna be a single-family dwelling. He's zoned properly for doing this, he just needs your approval for a flag lot. And really, it has to be a flag lot, because as you can see, looking at this plat, he has no way to subdivide and create a 100-foot wide lot.
What's the width there at the road? At the bottom?
Bottom of the drive, the,
Down at the flagpole
Yeah,
part,
the
the
flag
little,
is 50, the other is 122 where the house is located.
50 feet.
okay. I mean, everybody signed off on it?
Yes, sir.
It's,
Everybody signed off.
I move we approve as presented.
Motion,
Second.
David seconds. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. Anything else, Gene?
No, sir, but we have a whole bunch for next month again.
Oh geez, was it Christmas? All right,
We're gonna have an early meeting
We
next
are-
month, December 19th.
we're adjourned.
Oh, no.